Hey folks, and welcome back to Glenn and Adrian's Rock Talk. That's Adrian.
That's Glenn.
And today we are going to return to our look at Mark Lanegan, specifically with the Screaming Trees on their last official release, which was called Dust. I so happen to have an album right here, the vinyl. This is a really good album. I would even say this is probably the Screaming Trees' best album, although it does sound a little different than the stuff they did on the SST label, which by itself is also worthy of a mention. I also have a Screaming Trees anthology from SST Records that's really worthwhile. It's got about half of their overall output for SST on there, and it's a good listen. But this is the last thing. This came out in '96. This was the follow-up to their 1992 album, Sweet Oblivion, which had their biggest hit called Nearly Lost You, and was on the Singles soundtrack, if you remember that movie from the early 90s. Problem here was that Mark Lanegan was going through a lot of drug issues, addiction, and just other problems that led him to a life of pretty much total chaos and even criminality to some degree. He was essentially a drug dealer for much of this time to help him keep his heroin habit going, and then it turned into a crack habit as well. And so it was really bad. I've been reading his book, Sing Backwards and Weep, which came out in 2020. It's his autobiography, and it is a harrowing book. Just the life that he had was so awful for much of it, and he was out of control in terms of his addictions for much of the time, although I think he was fairly sober for most of the stuff that they did with SST. So it was only after that album that things really got out of hand. So he made another solo album during that time, and it just took them forever to get another record out. So it was 4 years later before Dust came out. But Dust is really good. It's got Benmont Tench from the Heartbreakers, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, on there as keyboard player. At one point he's playing two mellotrons on some of the songs. And so it's worth hearing that. Now we're going to be looking today at a live version of the song All I Know, which is one of the bigger songs, I think, off this record. It's from 1996 on Jools Holland. Live, Jools Holland was a show. All the big bands would go on, promote their stuff. I thought it'd be worth taking a look at this, and you're going to see a rather haggard Mark Lanegan up there because he's in Europe, which means he was having trouble finding the stuff he needed to keep himself from going into withdrawals and having DTs and whatever happens with people who are on heroin and having trouble getting off it. And yet he still manages to pull off a pretty good performance, as I understand it, just from the book and from people's comments. People say his voice didn't really suffer that much. He might disagree. He was mad at himself for his general state of being while recording the album. And so was the producer, George Drakoulias. Adrian, you know this song at all?
I don't know.
Let's go ahead and check this out. I'm really curious, just knowing all the backstory.
Telephone line. Gotta get away, gotta get away, get away, gotta get away for the Lord, Lord, baby, stay all that I know. Should have been, till the last way out of here. Swayed by deceitful kids. Said you better stay, said you better stay, better stay, said you better stay, bulldog, dog, got away all that I know. Should have been right, and for all that I know, should have been right.
Thoughts on that?
Mark Lanigan actually looks like somebody who's having a hard time in that video.
Yeah, he was probably dope sick for this particular. Yeah, it was a problem on this tour. Said it was a real bad issue. But it's interesting to see that anyway. You kind of like to be able to spot things like that sometimes in performance, if only as a reminder. That it's good to take care of yourself, especially if you're a performer. This was a big problem, by the way, in the 90s. There was a big wave of very talented musicians that were up and coming and making really good work that passed away from heroin. The guy from Blind Melon, Shannon Hoon, the guy from Sublime. I'm glad that Lanigan himself survived for a while after that. He went on for another 25 years, so that's good. And he did eventually get sober. It took a few more years. What I'm gathering is that he was mostly sober from about the start of the 2000s, something like that. By the way, the clean-cut looking guitar player on there was a guy that had just joined the band. His name's Josh Homme, and he started Queens of the Stone Age. He also had one of the very first stoner rock bands called Caius. But apparently, Mark, he said something in the book about trying to score over in Europe, which means going down a lot of dark alleys and trusting people you might not normally want to trust. And he had Josh Homme with him. And that ended up being a mistake because everybody thought Josh was a narc. And he almost got into some serious issues, with various people and couldn't score that night because of that. So he said, okay, you're not coming anymore. And apparently it was really harrowing for everybody involved. Josh is like, don't ever do that to me again. Later on, Josh also had Mark come into Queens of the Stone Age and do some vocals on some of their most iconic stuff. And Mark went on to collaborate with a lot of people and had a really fruitful solo career after the Trees. So there is kind of a happy ending there. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2022. Really, it's kind of surprising that he made it all the way to the age of 57, I think. Lane Staley was his best friend for a while there. Lane died in his early 30s and was basically out of commission by his mid-20s due to heroin and other stuff. But heroin was a big one. So, I'm kind of glad we're not hearing that many stories anymore about heroin overdoses. Did you see the Orange Amps on stage?
I think I did, yeah.
Yeah, there were a few of them. I think Josh Homme uses them. Maybe someone else does as well in there.
Yeah, there's some great guitar work in this song, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. As a matter of fact, the bass player and Mark have both passed away. Van Connor, brother of the guitar player on the other side, Gary Lee Connor, who is still around. And actually, I was thinking he might be a good interview. I might reach out to him at some point. Yeah, it would be nice to get a little bit more perspective on what was going on back then. And they did do some good work. I think the Screaming Trees are vastly underrated as a band. I think they were one of the best bands to come out of Seattle back when there was that whole Seattle gold rush of bands,
Yeah.
I thought this would be worth looking at, and I did enjoy that, and it was illuminating. Rough time for Mr. Lanigan, but glad that there was a better day later on for him. Okay, folks, so why don't you let us know what you thought of this clip, this song, if you ever saw the Screaming Trees, or if you ever saw Mark Lanigan perform for that matter. Certainly not going to be the last time he shows up on this channel, because we think he's underrated and needs the space to be spotlighted a little bit. But yeah, let us know, and if you do have a favorite song or something by either the Trees or Lanigan, leave it below. Maybe we'll consider it. Okay. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you enjoyed our presentation, please subscribe. All right, thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you on the next one, all right? Take care, folks.
See y'all later.